Hello and welcome to Infocus. I'm Bradley Valenaki. Thank you for your company. When a person or a group of people have been tricked, transported and sold or forced into situations against their will within country or abroad, that's human trafficking. But to explain more on this here in Papua New Guinea, I'm privileged to have with me in the studio two guests, Ms. Limawali Yalapan from the Department of Justice and Attorney General, and also Mrs. Enid Kantha from the IOM. Ladies, thank you for coming onto the program.
Thank you for having us.
All right, so I gave a sort of a broader meaning or definition to human trafficking. But for our small people to understand here in Papua New Guinea, what does that actually translate into for them to understand?
I think what we'll do is we'll probably start with Ms. Yalapan explaining where the basis of the law in Papua New Guinea comes from with the UN protocols, and we'll take it from there.
Right.
Okay, so most of the human rights breaches that we can see globally have various conventions that govern the way in which different countries develop a response or an effective government response. And so we can see this with the main Declaration of Human Rights. And specifically for human trafficking, there is an international convention called the United Nations Convention on Transnational Organized Crime. And so the offense of human trafficking in our law, which is under Section 208, C and 208D of the Criminal Code Act, is very similar in its wording to what the offense is defined internationally. So in order for us to look at the definitions of what human trafficking, I'll probably just emphasize a bit on what the elements are internationally, and then I'll come back to what the legislation through the Criminal Code provides in Papua New Guinea. So basically what the United Nations Convention on Transnational Organized Crime, we'll call it UNTOC for short, does is that it provides this international standard on best practice on how countries can respond to various forms of organized crime. So the convention covers, the UNTOC covers organized crime in general, but there are three protocols that are made under the convention. The first is protocol on people smuggling, as well as protocol on human trafficking. And the third is protocol on the trafficking of ammunition and their parts. And so the main convention, the main protocol that creates this definition on what human trafficking is the UNTOC protocol on human trafficking. And so internationally, how we define human trafficking is by looking at three elements or actions that we can look at in a case to identify if an offense has been committed. And so these elements of human trafficking are act. So the act is basically what the offender does. And then there's also the means. So the means is like how the action or how the offense is carried out. And the third thing that we look at is the purpose. And for human trafficking, the main purpose is exploitation. And so exploitation is a very broad term. Later on in our discussion, we can look at what exploitation is in the strict definition that's under the Criminal Code. But generally, how the UNTOC defines the purpose, which is the final element of human trafficking, in terms of what exploitation is it covers these different type of offenses or actions that we could classify as exploitation. The prostitution of others, or the sexual forms of exploitation, forced labor, slavery and servitude is another form of exploitation. And that also includes deceptive recruitment and other specific types of actions that fall within the broad category of forced labor. And finally, organ removal. Organ removal is a bit rare, but in PNG, I would say, but in other countries, it's quite common that people do find themselves in situations where they're victims and they've been tricked into donating an organ and they haven't been fully compensated for that. So those are the 3 forms of exploitation that are covered under the UNTOC. And this definition of what human trafficking is internationally is also very similar to what our own law in Papua New Guinea provides.
All right. So all in all, the presence of human trafficking is experienced here in Papua New Guinea as well.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. We'll go for a short break now, and on the other side, we'll discuss more on this in Papua New Guinea. We'll go for a break. Welcome back. You're watching Infocus. Thanks for your company. We continue on with the discussions, this time on human trafficking here in Papua New Guinea. And we have 3 common forms of trafficking throughout the world. Sex trafficking, forced labor, and also debt budgeting. Here in Papua New Guinea, what's the sort of common trafficking practiced here in the country?
So some of the most common forms that are being reported are instances of sexual exploitation or forced prostitution. We also have cases where there is labor exploitation or forced labor, or that also includes child labor cases, and domestic servitude. So maybe I'll just break that domestic servitude down so our people can understand this. So when we talk about domestic servitude, it's like people who are engaged in housekeeping work, or we bring people in from the village and maybe ask them to help us do some babysitting at home or cleaning around the home as well. So it's domestic services that they provide. Maybe initially when they were recruited or when we decided to bring them on board, we may have told them that we'd like you to come and help us do this, and we will pay you some money for the work that you do, or we will help you to upgrade your marks, do some other training courses. And so people might just agree to come along because of the promises of opportunity that we've explained to them, that when they come, then this is what's going to happen. Many a times they come and they stay with us, and then they find themselves doing very long hours of work. If they don't do certain things, they're being scolded. They're being restricted also in their movements, so they they can't go out. Or if they sit outside, like at the Buai market, then we're questioning, why are you sitting there? You're not supposed to go there. You shouldn't be talking to these people. And so they're kept in the home doing all these things. And if they even open their mouths to say, I don't like this, so I want to go back home, we might say to them that, well, in the village, you weren't living in a house like this. You didn't have a roof like this over your head. We weren't providing, you weren't eating this kind of meals. So you have to find your own way back, or you have to repay the airfares that I've paid for, or the PMV truck or boat fare that has been paid. So this is where we have people finding themselves in situations of domestic servitude. And it's something that we might take as normal, and that we shouldn't complain because we're helping a relative, or we should be helping a relative. And we don't realize or recognize that we are actually at fault and we are contributing to the exploitation of another person. So this is also something that we need to take on board now. Think about what we are doing, how we are treating our relatives, and we might be, in fact, contributing to their exploitation if we're not careful.
Of course. So for it to be characterized as human trafficking, some form of, trickery and transport, and also forced against their will, has to be in that situation for us to call it human trafficking.
Yes. So just like Ms. Yalapan was explaining, the elements of trafficking, the act, means, and purpose. So you have I'll use the example of bringing relatives into town, right? So we transport them, okay, from the village into town, but the means that is used might be deception, because we've told them that this is what's going to happen when you come. Say, for example, I'll put you in school, you can further your education, and based on that, they come along, or they agree to come along. Sometimes we use our cultural practices and the relationships that we have, or this is a relative and I'm assisting to take a child so I can raise this child, and later on they can work and support their family back in the village. And so those would be like the means that are used. And the purpose is exploitation. That intention to get them involved in maybe forced labor conditions, or have them do this kind of work at home and restrict their movements, etc., may have been what had caused us to go and initially do a recruitment in the village. We'd say recruitment, but like that's what happens. You go and you ask someone, say, I've got, I need someone to come and help. And so that's where we have the three elements. So for trafficking cases, you're thinking act, means, and purpose, and that's what you're looking out for. And that's for adult cases, so anyone above the age of 18, that's what you would have to identify, all three elements. For children, it's slightly different. Only two elements need to be present. So regardless of the fact that parents may give consent, regardless of the fact they may have been deceived, forced, threatened, coerced, or there's been an exchange of money or other benefits, as long as the child has been recruited, transported, transferred, or harbored for the purpose of exploitation, you have a case of child trafficking.
All right. So we're speaking about the cases here in Papua New Guinea. Have there been some cases and ultimately some convictions with regards to human trafficking here in Papua New Guinea?
And so, if I could just add on to what Ms. Kantha has said, before I get to the cases. So with regard to the description that she's provided on human trafficking, like sometimes when, just to elaborate on the example she gave on the domestic servitude cases, when we go and engage the services of a family member to assist us around in our homes, we may not see it as direct recruitment, but the action of you requesting, even if you're not requesting that particular person who will be in that situation, but even a family member to give consent for another family member to come, that still is a form of recruitment. And also, I wanted to emphasize on the movement. One of the biggest misconceptions about human trafficking is that it's an international offense. Like it can only happen internationally, like someone crosses a border and enters PNG, but there's the act of movement. It can be within a country, it can be within provinces in PNG
without crossing borders.
Yes, and also even from one suburb to another suburb in the same city or town. And so this brings me now to our precedent case of human trafficking in PNG, which you have raised. And so this case is called the State versus Gare, and it's a case that the IOM identified this case in 2015. And so prosecution in Papua New Guinea, as with all court matters, take a fair amount of time. So
is it a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I can't really comment on that. That's the court's process, but I mean, it is the way that the criminal justice system works. Sometimes it's very slow, and it's due to a range of factors, and sometimes victims feel as though they haven't received justice. So coming back to our case, for this particular case, there are a number of women, and you can see the elements of the offense very clear in this case. They had a family member who actually recruited them to travel from Port Moresby to another province in PNG. They went from Central Province to Simbu. And so they were part of a dance troupe. They actually went there for a completely different purpose, and that was to, dance, do a performance, and then they'd return back to their homes. And that's the understanding. Based on that understanding, they actually left their homes and they went to Simbu. But, when they arrived there, they found themselves up after they had done what they were required to do, or what their purpose there, which was to open the lodge with a performance. They found themselves being asked not asked, but forced and coerced by the lodge owner to perform sexual services for patrons and, people who came to celebrate the opening of the lodge. And so it's very unfortunate, but these young ladies, they spent some time up in Simbu before they could be rescued. And maybe I'll let Mrs. Kantha also elaborate a bit more on this case. But with regard to this case, we have obtained a conviction, and so I'm not at liberty to name the accused in this case, but he was arrested and he was charged for human trafficking under Section 208 C of the Criminal Code, and he's now currently serving his sentence.
All right. So I guess it's a good thing for those that were those whose rights have been violated in this case, and we hope to see more of this happen in the country and people coming forward and reporting this. We'll take a short break now and come back on the other side with more of the discussions on Infocus. Welcome back. Discussions on human trafficking. Now we'll continue on with our discussions, this time on the cultural aspects of things we have here in Papua New Guinea. Arranged marriages, is this also part of human trafficking?
Well, you could say when we talk about the abuse of our cultural practices, so we have some very good cultural practices, we have good customs as well. It's when we abuse these customs and when we abuse these cultural practices that infringe on another person's human rights, then these customs then become something that that becomes questionable. In the case of trafficking, one of the means that traffickers may employ to get victims involved in this process is the abuse of these cultural practices. So some of these practices include the customary adoptions that we talk about, the arranged marriages, the exchange marriages, the bride price that is being paid in exchange for a woman. And these practices have been around for so many years. Today, this is being abused many times. We are seeing cases that come through. You have someone who's been arranged to marry another person. They weren't in a relationship or they were not friends, all of these things before they then ended up being married to them. So, em kind of all pasitok pinisa. All tokosem em by mariti mem na all makim pinis na. Custom em tokosem you married ko lahap, so all by give one rakam. And this is where they have no say over this arrangement. Many times they don't have a say, and many times we find young women and girls in these kind of situations, and then they end up doing all the housework. So in a situation of domestic servitude or slavery-like conditions within that marriage, also sexual exploitation that could result from these kind of practices. But the key thing to remember is it's the abuse of these cultural practices then that can lead to the exploitation of another individual.
Okay, so in our earlier discussions, I talked about the common human trafficking throughout the world, one of which is debt bonding. And here in Papua New Guinea, when you talk about, giving merigo long narapla, samla tu iwok long use him display long pay him back again all samplol dina or ligat long all narapla. Is that also part of this?
Yes, so if you may like look lo side lo dina wa plenty time you may online go na kisi dina o online suppose beki dis la dina o hare up interest them by build up na igat sample line where you may look him online lo bolkan na kisi card blue so you walk fortnight go narapaman holy card nem go swipe mem kisim pay back by money em kisi back kwante interest now suppose na lo beki disla or narapla kain dina where you kisim na you had lo beki disla dina then you stop inside the kalabus now because all still by like you lo beki disla dina na suppose you had lo bekim all can ask him you lo go na walk or make sample narapla something no try lo beki disla dina you got na sample time to all by ask all can ask him lo pikini merit do come suppose you na lo beki disla hard work or disla dina way you kiss him lo me okay you give him disla pikini merit come or you give him disla car come you give him disla kind of something or same.
All right, so you may talk long all cases you may look him here inside Papua New Guinea. How through you plus look o galasimol one case mi fit him straight human trafficking na give me example blong how you plan all line agencies blong government is how work one time blong kare mo line ug say di brook him law igolong kalabus.
I think maybe I just comment as well how we plus identify more case. Na in terms of all service where all government, all different service providers are providing. Ms. Kantha can talk quickly lo this la. So generally, me plus I make one process also call him victim assessment. Power blow government lo make him this la victim assessment stop law criminal code section 208G. Empower blow Minister for Justice law assess him all case na refer him. Tasolino Minister for Justice or like a criminal law or like an agency and work law criminal matters tasolba make him this law. Even online law public too you can look law. So as you look him this law triple elements action that was taken, when method or how rouse him all man na carry all gonna exploit him all, whether force was used or strong platok all man use him. Now, this are different all types of exploitation we've been discussing here. Sexual exploitation, labor, types of labor exploitation, domestic servitude, and one example here, na organ removal. And so, suppose public too, all can identify all this kind of something in work come up, no affecting one man or Mary. All can go to police station, all can lay complain. Right. So human trafficking is one criminal offense. So me no stop him all man lo go na put him complain on them police na police too all can look him this complain where you make him no all can scale him up. Human trafficking or one narapla offense or some all engage in services plan picking in law work or some prostitute or ikat all narapla offense too, but public almost gonna complain, lame complaint time or look him something come up.
Alright, so plenty time online where all stop ananit long display category time all money ibagarapi all plenty time all meria all vulnerable groups long society all is away pilim poret long golong ay long police station because plenty time all is away salim all go back or nokad workman lo station or nokad police car logo walk him display kind of walk one more nar plahap where oli na plongo na kisim halivim suppose oli pilimosem igat birwai stop na all bagarapi mo long display side blong human trafficking.
So suppose online na plogo lo police station lo report him kind of case. Suppose you got one digital phone, you can save him this number 7150800. Now you can call him this number, lo report him one case, na case sampla halivim. Suppose you stop close to one church, lo community you or village courts, or you got one organization and stop him so work lo help him all mama all pikinini all families. You can go and report him lo have to. Because all got linked become all narap all service providers, all narap lines are providing this kind help him, all can help him. He got one to stop human trafficking hotline number, but right now this number I am off because he got problem on the phone line, but this number I am stopped and this number I am been helping plenty online who said he been ring before ask him. Now find out good whether situation will start blame and one case one situation where all want a victim of trafficking or no gat na this hotline number phone call bin kam la hap na halivim bin go lo this girls all bin kisilo central province na gontab lo simbo but igat plenty on narap line all stop usait make you walk inside lo this kind situation as well or help him online.
All right, last plus Kim Blomi suppose online igo long ay long police long kisim displa halivim oli pilim olsem all rights long all violate mananit long displa human trafficking one unit or inside long police have look long displa.
Okay, so human trafficking specifically in Nogaton play unit, but you can all public all can go family and sexual violence unit lo report plenty all police officer all work lo family and sexual violence unit all been kisim training pinis lo how lo identify him suppose this la complain where wampla man or Mary Megim wampla human trafficking offense has been committed. So Family and Sexual Violence Unit, but me understand no semino logata lo Papua New Guinea no gata family and sexual violence like unit logata have, but just generally any police station you can go long na complain. That's all. Miss understand no plenty time online sa hadlo understand him too, like when them kind rights blow narapla been violating, so good platu logo community workers or NGO within your areas. One man where you trust him, you can help him write him statement below you. You can public can go there as well to get help. Also, all get a province lo Papua New Guinea got on the public solicitor's office too. So public too suppose all feel lo semol need him sampla mo halivim lo we lo kisim information all can go lo public solicitor's office lo provincial like headquarters blow too.
Right. Tupla yumi kam long arere blong program blong mi pla long tete big pla to kam mas long itu pla long kam sinan wante mi long program now.
Thank you. Thank you.
You watch him in focus. Suppose you got some pla ask him long program tete night. You can email him pla. You come long email now. You look him long screen. You can also be any mipla long social media too, long all accounts blong mipla gat long him. Now you can watch him this program behind time long YouTube. Long ogatalan long here. You got good pla night. Bye bye.